Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about the RKE installation. Now some of you might not have heard about RKE, but it's the Kubernetes distribution, and one of the Kubernetes distribution in normally the Kubernetes nowadays is something which everybody needs to know, right? Be it a kind of DevOps engineer, somebody who is working like a in cloud, or you're working in as a developer, or in any field. If you're working in IT, in application software development or something, in a platform support, you need to understand the Kubernetes well, right? So it's a demanding solution for sure. So Kubernetes comes with a different distribution. The vanilla Kubernetes is something which is with a kubeadm as a binary you can download and install. So I'll talk about the Kubernetes first. So before we go into Rancher, if I briefly talk about the Kubernetes, not what is Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an orchestration software which orchestrate the containerized workload. It means that Kubernetes will be acting like an orchestrator engine, a kind of software, and there would be many Docker host or similar to Docker containerized virtual machines. So Kubernetes can orchestrate virtualization kind of similar to the container. So it can orchestrate the containers on any of the virtual machine if those virtual machines are part of the Kubernetes cluster. So that's the Kubernetes. Now Kubernetes comes in a different uh, distribution and different form. So the vanilla Kubernetes, mainly it is two. The one which is kind of community, and the other is kind of enterprise, right? So most of the names which I'm going to take here, if we talk about the community, then community is which is self-supported distributions. Majorly the vanilla Kubernetes comes in this, which you can install with kubeadm binary. So I will take this name as a kubeadm. Then after kubeadm we have many like kind, which is Kubernetes in Docker, right? If you have a Docker installed in a single virtual machine, you can deploy kind clusters and then you can run your workloads there. I'll create the series of Kubernetes installation. Uh, so anybody interested, please subscribe my video and check all those check my channel and check those installation videos, right? So kind is other one. The K3s is one another lightweight distribution of Kubernetes. And then we have RKE. Rancher has come up with two different, again the community distribution. One is the RKE1 and another is RKE2. The difference between RKE1 and RKE2 is something which we need to understand here. So RKE1 is something I'm going to discuss today. So RKE1 is Rancher Kubernetes engine, which we can install with a single RKE binary. It's very easy. The installation is very easy. It's all about the RKE binary and then the config.yaml file which you can prepare. So let's get started. The RKE, how it works. So for RKE installation, we need at least minimum two machines. One we can have master, another can have worker. But at the same time, you need a bootstrap also, right? So we need a bootstrap virtual machine, a bootstrap node. So this bootstrap node can be of anything. It can be Ubuntu virtual machine, your own Ubuntu box where you're working every day. Otherwise, if you're using Windows, it's fine. It works on Windows also. And if you're working on Mac, then it works on Mac also, right? So the first thing first is that we need to install the RKE binary. So RKE binary installation is pretty straightforward and simple. So here the installation method, you can download the binary from the release, right? Just like here, the latest release of RKE, right? And if you go ahead here in the release, then you will find the different flavor of for the installation on different operating systems. So if you're using Windows 64-bit, you can download this binary. If you're using, let's say, Linux, then you can use the MD61 64, like from here. Yeah, and this every RKE binary would have a number. So if we talk about the release 1.5.1, which I'm going to demonstrate now, is the latest one, and with this binary, if you see the enhancement, or let's say the Kubernetes version, because Kubernetes as a software also comes in a different version, so 1.25, 26 and 27, these are the three versions which 1.5.1 can install, right? So without any configuration, it will install the latest one, which is the default. You can see here would be 1.27.8. I'm going to show this installation and then we'll validate this version also. So RKE installation is simple. You can download here. If you have Mac, you can download from here also, or otherwise there are several ways. So how I'm going to do is I'll open a terminal. By the way, I'm using Mac, so I'll go with the Linux way, or not go with the Linux way, but we'll go with the Mac way of doing the installation. So herein it's very easy. I can simply run brew install RKE and I enter, and my RKE installation is done. Now if I run RKE-v, it will show me that what is the RKE version I have. So if you see 1.5.1, which is the latest one that I have installed now. So going forward, so installation is done, and you see here these binaries, all about these binaries, and then how you can get it installed. If you are using in Windows in somewhere, then RKE version, the command you can run, right? If you are alternative in Mac OS, this is what you can run. If you want to update, then you can update with this update command also. Now the next part is how we need to prepare the nodes. Okay, node means these two machines. So preparation, if I talk about what is required here as a preparation, then first is Ubuntu. I'm going to take Ubuntu 22.04 as operating system here. You can use any. It can be of Red Hat also, or Rocky Linux, or any other Linux distribution. There's nothing like it should work only with the Ubuntu. It's not like that. So Ubuntu is something which I'm taking here, 22.04, and then you need to install Docker CE edition. I'm going to install Docker CE edition as a software, right, which will be here installed. Other thing is we need a user. So let me make it. Other thing is you need a SSH key based authentication from Bootstrap to both VMs. Both VM in this case means these two VMs for which I have a plan to set up, one as master and another as worker. So Docker CE SSH key based authentication from Bootstrap to both the virtual machine. This is what we need to set up, right? So if I talk about both these virtual machine, I have already set it up, right? So if I go ahead here, how the SSH key base, it means if you are on your Bootstrap machine and if you're running SSH and then with any of the user, that user should be sudo, right? So I can write down here the user, I can say a sudo user, right, with Docker group. What does it mean? That this user should be able to run the Docker, right? We will be setting up this prerequisites also, so no problem. If I go ahead here, then I have 71, right? This is the first machine, and I will open up in a different tab another machine also. So the second machine is 72. If you see, I'm not giving any password and it's a passwordless authentication, so most of you are already knowing it how to set it up, so I'm not going into that. So RKE2 server and RKE2 client, these are the two machines which I'll be setting it up, right? So both the machine needs one step, and it's very easy to install Docker CE here. So what you need to do is you should have curl installed, right? So you can run curl here and then run git.docker.com. okay, that's it. So if you run this, this command will print you actually the shell script, right? So then you can redirect here, okay, and then go ahead with sudo sh. That's it. So if you're running like this, and I'm going to copy this entire command, and I'll have to execute here in the second machine also. So this single command will install your machine with Docker, right? Docker C. So we'll wait for some time till this gets installed, and it would be very easy. So in machine first, you see the installation is done. So now I've logged in with user Vijay, and if I run docker command, let's say docker ps, right, here I am able to run because my user is already part of the Docker group. You see here, if I run id for this user, you see that part of the Docker group. But if in your case, if this user is not part of the Docker group, right after the installation you have to run one more command, which is sudo user mode g docker, and then the username. You can run Vijay, the username, or otherwise if you don't not sure about this, then you can run this, right? So the user, or otherwise you can use who am I. Yeah, so id Vijay, make sure that it's Docker. And in your case, if you're doing it the very first time, it might not be able to run directly the Docker command, so you can simply log out and do a login again. Then if you run docker ps just to validate, if you see something similar, the output, it means that Docker installation is done for you, right? Same way, here also I need to validate docker ps. Now commands are running fine. This is a sudo user also, and this user is able to run docker ps command and docker commands also, right? It means that we are good up to here. The sudo user, ssh based authentication, and docker installation done. Now next part we need to do is we need to create the RKE installation configuration, right? I already have RKE, so I have to set it up. I have to open the another tab also. Here I have RKE, this is my bootstrap. So this tab is for my bootstrap, this is the client too, this is the server, right? So in bootstrap, what I need to do immediately is I need to run the RKE command. So if you go ahead here and try to run the RKE command, you'll see that it's config, right? So config will set up the cluster configuration. I will start doing RKE config, right? And if you run, this will ask you parameters, options, and if you give the correct options, it will automatically generate the config file here, right? So the same thing I'm going to do. So I have my SSH key path. If you have your SSH key somewhere else, you can give the path. That's a private SSH key, by the way, using which your RKE binary will be able to log in into both the machines, right? So this is my current path. That's it. Now how many number of hosts you have? If you have one, you give one. In my case I have two, I'm gonna give two. If let's say I would have 4, 5 or 5, wherein 3 master and 2 worker nodes, then I would have given here a 2. So I'm giving, sorry, 5 in that case. But right now I have 2 machines, so I'm going to give 2. Out of these 2, one would be acting like a master, another would be like worker. So SSH address, I need to give address of those the hosts. So the IP address, obviously for the SSH communication, so 71, that's one. The first node port 22, that's the default port. I'm not doing anything here. So it will ask about the private key path. Now private key path, since cluster level private key I have already given, so I will simply say enter, then I will simply say enter again, and it is saying that you have entered empty SSH, so defaulting to cluster level SSH. If you have different keys for different clusters, then you can take. Now it's talking about it's asking for a user, which user using which you would be logging, you would be making your login, right? So here I'm going to give Vijay. So it's saying whether this host is a control plane host, yes or no. By default it's yes, so you say yes, fine. And then it says, is this host the same host is going to work as a worker also, so you say no. And then it says this is a host where etcd also, you can say yes, because we need at least one etcd host also, right? So now it says override the host name. So this is this is not going to override the IP address, don't worry. It will be the what is the visible name, right, for your cluster when you run kubectl get node. So RKE2 server I'm gonna give that. This will override the host name only. Internal IP, if you have any external and internal IP differentiation, then you can give. I have nothing, so I'll say none. Enter. Then it's talking about the Docker socket path. If you have different, you can give, otherwise mostly it will be same. Now it says about the SSH address of host 2. Same sequence, 192.168.172 is going to be my second host IP address, same port, the private key same way. Then the user is going to be Ubuntu. Then it's asking for the control plane host. Is it? No, I'll say no, because the second VM is targeted to be as worker node here. Then it says worker node, so I'll say yes. etcd, I say no. Then override the host name, I can give RKE2 client. That's the host name of those virtual machine, but it doesn't make any difference if you are not giving anything, and simply put enter. Internal IP same, Docker same. Now it is asking about the network plugin type. So the installation will automatically take care of the CNI plugin. So if you want, if you are interested, any Flannel, Calico, View, Canal, ACI, any, so I will select View here, otherwise Calico. So let me select View. So I'm going to select View. Okay, so I'll write View and I'll hit enter. Authentication strategy is saying simply say yes, accept default. Then Kubernetes Docker image, say yes. Cluster domain, fine. I'm not gonna change anything. I'll keep everything default. Based on your environment, your system, your setup, you can modify any of these items, right? Pod security policy, I'm not enabling it. If you want, you can enable. Cluster network CIDR, it says service CIDR, cluster CIDR, and DNS service, core DNS, right? Any other manifest file or URL if I have, I say no, I can add later on also. So now if you see, you do ls, you'll see that the cluster.yaml file here in this way, this is file which it has generated. So if you open this file right here, the cluster way, you see that everything is here, right? Now if you want to do any modifications in this file, like you can do, like how? So let's say for services etcd, any extra configuration, any extra arguments you have to pass, that you can give. The kube API, any extra argument, scheduler, kubelet, kube proxy. Network, it's taking already the plugin as View. This is the one which you have selected during the initialization. Now if you are using more IPs, since you can define the other IPs also for API endpoints, right? If you have two API endpoints, one is internal, another is external. Internal, out of the box, the certificate would be signed, but if you want to create another endpoints also, you can give sans here, right? Any add-ons that you can define here. So these are the system images. If you have your images coming from internal registry, then you can change these images to your internal registry. These are the SSH key paths and everything. These are the options which we have given here already, right? The ingress provider, that's interesting thing which I want to do it, is the ingress provider. So if you see the ingress provider, if I am writing here nginx, what it will do, it will automatically install nginx ingress controller for me, right? And I can give any other options and extra environment, etc. for these, the network mode and many things which probably we'll talk about later on, right? So this is the ingress nginx. I want that it should be installed. You'll see that the matrix server also, it's talking about the provider here for the monitoring. So we can say matrix, and all of these things are coming from where? If you go ahead and see this documentation, right, the kube config, there would be a lot of Kubernetes configuration item, let's say, right? Everything which we are doing, let's say network plugin. So here is the network plugin. Instead of View, you can say Flannel. If you want to disable, you can say none, right? The other parameters are like authentication authorizations also, here. The other is the authentication and then sans. I was speaking about if you have in case of AWS or something where you have the DNS name and many other things, so you can write down here so that it can give the authentication certificate, the PKI certificate for these endpoints also, right? So that's here. And the private registries, if you have any, you can write down the private registry configuration also, right? DNS provider, there are basically 3: Kube DNS and Core DNS. So if you want, you can enable Core DNS or Kube DNS any. So DNS provider is none here. If you want, let's say, Core DNS, you can define the Core DNS provider, right? I'm not going to do anything, so default whatever is coming should be coming. Ingress controller, this is one part which I used to select, right? Nginx. So if I'm defining Nginx, then Nginx would be installed. Any other configuration in Nginx, tolerations and keys and anything, you can do it here. If you want to disable, you want to install by yourself, then you can say none also, right? So this is how the components and things are working. If you see here the example cluster.yaml, also the example cluster.yaml, there's a full cluster.yaml which speaks about almost every options here, right? The system images, the services, the configuration for Kube API, if anything, audit logs, enabling the rate limit, etc., the pull images, and many more. The configurations, you can have a look. It's really broad. So any add-on inclusion, etc., also we can take it here. Any add-on with you want to deploy any pods, anything, that also is possible, right? So this is okay. Now after these installation, and if I talk about the provider, somewhere I talk the monitoring, right? It should be matrix server. So if you just copy this one and just say that the provider should be matrix server. I'm not taking any other things here. So this is good, and I'm done with the cluster.yaml. Now I'm ready to fire the RKE command for the installation. So again, if you check out the help, then you'll get to know that up is a command argument for the cluster, right? Making this cluster up. So I will run RKE up. It will automatically take the read the file cluster.yaml, all the entries which I have. Based on those entries, it will start configuring my cluster. It will take some time also, so you can sit back and relax easily. Now it is pulling the images. Okay, so good part is that RKE1 is kind of Terraform like installer, because if you give the SSH ports, etc., right, and authentication configuration also, and it is assuming that you have Docker C community edition installed already. So it does the installation, and then it creates a state file also. So it generates RKE command. After this installation finished, it will generate two files. One is the state file and another is the kubeconfig file. So obviously kubeconfig file, you need to run your kubectl commands, and the state file would have the installed cluster configuration, the state. So next time if you want to uninstall, let's say, same like Terraform apply and Terraform destroy, you can simply tear down this entire cluster and your nodes, everything will be simply wiped out. Single command. And next time, if let's say you need to add some add-ons, you need to do some modifications, you need to perform some upgrades, etc., on the existing cluster which is already installed with this RKE. RKE can take care of those things also. What overall you need to do is same like Terraform I was speaking about, right? So same like Terraform, you do your modifications in main.tf and then you run Terraform apply again. Same here also. If you do any modification in your cluster.yaml file, what all you need to do is just run RKE up again. And if you run RKE up again, if you give the another specific version, etc., you are adding some add-on manifest file, etc., everything will be executed on existing cluster, right? And it will modify the cluster in a similar way how you are asking for the modifications. So I did many modifications based on my environment, and those things are with me, which I will probably give a link of GitHub where you all can check it out, right? So in cluster.yaml we can, if you want, we can modify the ingress related things. um, there are many things in ingress. You can add some configuration specific items, like let's say ingress body max size, etc. Those things you can add. You can give the cluster name, you can include the add-ons like certificate manager and metal lb and something else also, so that while it is creating your cluster, at the end of the creation it will start running the cert manager and metal lb and other components also. So it's really beneficial in case it gives you basically the ready-made cluster with everything you are defining. The major chunk of effort you have to take is on the configuration of the cluster YAML file. So you see that it's finished the building Kubernetes cluster successfully. Now, as I said, if I run ls again, you'll see that cluster.yaml, apart from cluster.yaml, you see cluster.rke state, where you will find all the state of this cluster. Then you see kubeconfig cluster.yaml file also. This is the file which I need to work on, right? This is my kubeconfig. So what I'm gonna do is I will simply say export, and I will say key kubeconfig is equals to, and I'm gonna give this file so that I can start running kubectl. So if I'm running kubectl get node command, you see that 91 second back 1.27.8, that's a version of Kubernetes cluster, RKE2 client and server, and it's ready, right? I have the cluster running now. So kubectl get pod, if I'm running for all the namespaces, you see that these are the jobs, by the way, which just gets completed. Weave was the network. I choose to install ingress also, so now you see the ingress controller is running here. Core DNS is the default DNS service, not kube DNS. You would have option to select. Matrix server is also running, and we see that we have ingress controller and everything deployed, right? So if I run kubectl now, and you see top node, just to validate if my matrix server is working fine. So you see that matrix server is working fine, right? I have the correct memory utilization, CPU utilization, etc. Same is for pod also. If I run, this is how we run, right? So this was it. This was the overall how we can use RKE to spin up new cluster. And just one more thing, if you have, let's say, 2-3 you want to achieve high availability also, and you want to set it up like 2-3 different clusters, then one cluster but with 3 master for a high availability purpose and 2 worker nodes. Let's say you have 5, then overall node 5 you can give 5 while doing the configuration. When it is asking about the server VM1, VM2 and VM3, and let's say VM4 and VM5, what you need to do is simply you can say for VM1 that yes, it is going to be control plane, yes, the another one is also going to be control plane, the another one is also going to be control plane, and when it says for 4, you say it's fine to have as worker. For this one also you can say it's fine to have worker, and then internally the API and everything will be taken care of. You can put external load balancer also on top of these control planes, so that you can have only single endpoint for your API access, so that if you are running kubectl from any of the machine, let's say, and this one is down, it's not going to make any difference for you, right? And tomorrow if I need to, let's say, add another worker node, for example, this is my fine, this is configuration, I have the state file also, but what if I need to expand my cluster? What in that case you need to do only thing is that you open this one, right? Just copy paste this portion from here line to here, and add the configuration or IP address of the third node, right? Put the role as worker, define the hostname override, give the user and all these parameters. Simply run RKE up again. So if you run RKE up again, the RKE will automatically take care of the worker node joining, etc., and the third node would be part of the cluster. right? So this is how we can set our RKE cluster, RKE1 cluster. So in our next video, in my next video, I'll be speaking about the RKE2 cluster installation, and we'll be speaking about how the RKE2 is different from the RKE1.